Today's faction focus is on the Grey Knights, and it's got a few surprises, which are sure to incite some salt. Anyways, let's take a look. Let's start with the biggest surprise. The Grey Knights' army rule isn't their Tides of the Warp system, which served as their dynamic rule since 8th edition's Psychic Awakening. Instead, their army rule is Teleport Assault.
Were there some rewrites I missed?
The article isn't wrong in that one of the Grey Knights' thematic associations are their teleportation strikes, and after all, their psychic specialism can be reflected in other areas of the rules. Carrying on, mechanically, I do think Teleport Assault is interesting. It allows you at the end of your opponent's turn to pull a number of your units off the board and put them into reserves, and in the reinforcement step of your next movement phase, they can be set up on the battlefield 9 inches away from enemy models, though it notes you cannot select units in engagement range with enemy units. It opens up room for a lot of flexibility, able to shift and move units where you need them. It's by no means a bad system to have as an army rule in and of itself. Plus, I'm pleased to see that it seems GW finally understands how stupid it is to make someone pull a unit off at the start of their turn, and then return it at the start of their next turn when the game is only 5 turns. And so, if you're a betting man, you'd think, okay, so the Psychic Army doesn't flex any psychic potential in their army rule, so surely that will be represented in their Detachment rule. After all, the Detachment rules we've seen thus far have all been showcasing the prototypical versions of each faction. And you'd be wrong. The Grey Knights Detachment rule for their index period is Teleport Shunt, allowing you to represent your love for teleportation even more. It grants you that each time a unit with the Deep Strike ability advances, which the article points out applies to your infantry and nemesis dreadknights, you can add 6 inches to that unit's move characteristic, instead of rolling, and that unit is treated as if it could fly. Which sounds pretty cool, right? You're able to take your guys and teleport them around. But as you'll see, there aren't any assault weapons, tools to treat weapons as assault, or treat units as stationary or advance and charge in the preview. So, the Detachment rule wants you to give up shooting and charging in exchange for movement, on a low unit count elite army. I'll save my righteous fury for the end of the video. The first unit on preview is the Purgation squad. We can see from their stat line the Grey Knights are moving up to a more elite standard, now sitting at a 2-up armor save. The article notes this, not here of course, but down at the bottom of the article, because that just makes more sense. Their ranged weapons are more or less in line with their current iteration, but notably the Psi Cannon has gained a meaningful bump to Strength 8, and interestingly it seems at least some, or perhaps even all of the Nemesis Force weapons, have been consolidated into a single Nemesis Force weapon, hosting a profile similar to the Halberd. And we can note that Silencers, Psi Cannons, and Nemesis Force weapons all have the Psychic tag, which is a nice touch giving some room for unique interplay. On the ability front, the Purgation Squad's unique ability is the Astral Aim Psychic power. It gives their weapons indirect fire, though it requires the unit is visible to another friendly Psyker unit. But there is no test to be rolled, which is good. Unfortunately, the big cheese isn't here. Instead, we have a Grandmaster in Nemesis Dreadknight, and he seems like a fairly potent unit. Notably, he's been bumped up to Toughness 8. The Gatling Silencer has traded a point of AP for strength, though interestingly, unlike other Gatling weapons, no devastating wounds are built in. Instead, it has sustained hits, which after thinking on it, as a mechanic might be more enjoyable for game feel than devastating wounds. The Heavy Psi Cannon has lost a point of AP but gained increases in strength and damage, and the Heavy Incinerator appears to be unchanged, barring it gaining the Torrent and Ignore cover tags associated with Flamer weapons. The melee weapons do seem to have been dialed back more so, in some degree due to the AP deflation of 10th, though the hammer has worsened, now with damage d6 plus 1 from d3 plus 3, and the sword sweep has lost its 2 damage. The Dread Fists though have probably taken the biggest drop, no longer a strength 12 AP 3 damage 2 weapon. It now likely serves as a flatly worse melee weapon for loading up with all DACA. Ability wise, the Grandmaster has 2. Surge of Wrath, his psychic ability used once per battle in the fight phase, allows a single unit with Surge of Wrath to reroll hit rolls, wound rolls, and damage rolls when attacking a monster or vehicle unit. It's an ability which makes the Grandmaster in Nemesis Dreadknight extremely reliable, but its restrictions discourage you from spamming the unit across the board, which is more tasteful for the game, I think. Though I would hope that the standard Nemesis Dreadknight is not affected by this same ability in the same way. And Heroism's Favor ensures that stratagems used on the Grandmaster and Nemesis Dreadknight cost 1 command point regardless of their actual cost. It's a nice quality of life ability. If I were to guess, this ability would likely appear on the Grandmaster on foot as well, but paired with a different psychic ability. In the weapon spotlight, we have a psychic weapon, the Purifier Squad's Purifying Flame. What can be said? It's an 18-inch one-shot attack which hits on 3s at strength 4 AP1 dealing 1 damage. But notably, it's psychic with anti-infantry 2+, so its strength 4 will always wound infantry on 2s. Assuming every model in the unit makes an attack, it's not bad as some extra spice to go alongside their Stormbolters. In the stratagem spotlight, we got 2 stratagems. Haloed and Soulfire for 2 command points, used in your movement phase on a Grey Knight Psyker unit which just arrived from Deep Strike or Teleport Assault. It prevents enemy units from making ranged attacks against that unit unless they are within 12 inches. It's an interesting stratagem which I could see being used to hold on to a key objective in the late game against foes who don't like to engage in close quarters. And Radiant Strike is also 2 command points used in the fight phase on a Grey Knight Psyker, which grants their psychic attacks the Devastating Wounds ability. This pairs terrifyingly with our Grandmaster. For starters, when used on him it only costs 1 command point. But if it's playing into Surge of Wrath, those Devastating Wounds pairs incredibly well with those full rerolls to wound, really helping to sell the idea the Grandmaster and Dreadknight can take on a greater demon with confidence. And that's it for this faction focus. And what do I think? I think this may be the worst of the lot. All I can praise is that the army and detachment rules were shown, providing some idea of the intended playstyle. But come on. No Tides of the Warp or any psychic flexing system as the army rule for an army that is characterized by being fully comprised of psychers. Not to throw shade at the Thousand Sons, but their legion is mostly filled with dust. And sure, Tides of the Warp may end up returning as a detachment to replace Teleport Shunt, which, based on what we're given in this preview, seems like an awful detachment rule. An elite low model count army like the Grey Knights, which is characterized by teleporting in and being dynamic with their physical and mental prowess, is given a detachment rule to allow as many units as you want to move 6 inches more in exchange for doing nothing else. It would make a great stratagem, but here it's a widespread rule that you can't squeeze much juice out of. Teleport Shunt. I can think of a better word, which also happens to rhyme with shunt. And sure, benefit of the doubt should be conceded as we haven't seen the totality of the toolkit, but we can certainly say this is a dogshit preview. No clarifying that the shunting is an either-or between gaining its movement or acting in the rest of your turn, or mention of tools which feed into the detachment rule to provide exceptions, such as shunt and count as stationary or advance and charge. And I'd be remiss not to point out, without those definitions in place, it becomes harder to perceive the bounds of the toolkit and the intended playstyle. It makes for a bad preview. On top of that, we got no battle line unit on preview to demonstrate how the basic units interact with the core army rules so they remain encouraged, and no Kaldor Drago on preview as a Big Cheese spotlight feature, though I will concede the Grandmaster in Nemesis Dreadknight is useful as a spotlight to establish a ceiling, but that could have been achieved with a weapon spotlight plus ability, like with the Mutilith Vortex in yesterday's Thousand Sons preview. And on top of it all, the preview has the gall to jerk off the Grey Knights' dicks, as quoted by Scott. The Grey Knights are an indomitable force of empirically charged space marines who make your regular Adeptus Astartes look friendly by comparison. Piss off and understand the terrible optics gained from saying these ones are better. It's a poor character which needs to establish their merit by comparing their skills as way better than the already established one, and it demonstrates that you have no self-awareness with regards to brand management or customer/fan perception when you continue to do so. Anyways, this one gets a 4 out of 10 from me. But I want to hear from you. What did you guys think of this faction focus?